Creativity is important for every learner because it's essential to every subject and every discipline. Whether that means coming up with a unique idea or argument in English language or literature, coming up with a novel perspective on a historical event in history, or designing a unique and valuable science experiment. Across every subject and discipline, creativity is the core to original thinking and deeper thinking. And when students have the ability to create something that's novel and new, unique, and adds value, learning across the board becomes deeper, richer, more authentic, and more interesting and engaging for both students and teachers.
To help students look at content in new ways, I often look at what's happening in the real world, what's innovative. While in schools we tend to work in silos, in the real world people learn from each other all the time. People who work in biology collaborate with people in technology to create interesting products. I try and find these examples and show them to students so they can see that even in mathematics, in science, in every area, there is creativity, even the ones that you wouldn't normally expect to find them.
An easy way to start is to ask your students to look at the content from a different perspective. What might Gandhi think about the situation? How might Marie Curie solve this problem?
Building creative skills doesn't happen overnight. It's a process that takes time, effort, persistence, and resilience. It's our job as educators to help students build those skills by teaching creativity in all subjects and situations. Because creativity is the fuel of all interesting thinking, doing, and work. The challenge for us as educators is understanding how to integrate creativity into our teaching on a day-to-day basis. It really starts with asking yourself 3 key questions. How can I model creativity skills to my students? How can I encourage creativity in my classroom and lesson plans? How can I encourage my students and colleagues to be more creative? Evidence suggests that the strategies that support creativity also support depth of understanding. When we ask students to use content in diverse ways, to think and create with what they know, we not only get a glimpse into their level of understanding, we help them to deepen their knowledge as they go. Start by defining what creative thinking is. Ask yourself, what in your curriculum currently supports creativity, and what techniques and strategies can you use to get your students thinking about those subjects creatively? Here are some examples. Encourage your students to think about a subject from multiple perspectives by adopting a persona. How would their parents or friends view or think about this subject?
When you are beginning to get into this mind frame of how you can get your class and your students to take a more creative turn, think small to start. Get your kids to create one thing that maybe in the past you wouldn't have even imagined. For example, instead of having them do that worksheet, think of a way that they can show their learning, perhaps by creating a video to tell what they understand. It doesn't have to be a huge change. Start somewhere small and then get comfortable with your kids creating and move forward.
Come up with many different ideas, many different endings for a story, many different strategies a historical figure might use, many different variables that might be impacting an ecological system. Where students could be asked, let's come up with many ideas for this. Is there a place to ask, what if? What if something changed? What if we did something differently? What if a character did something differently? What if a historical figure did something differently? What might be different as a result of that? Is there a place we could use a metaphor? Is there a place we could use an analogy? And maybe most important, how can we get students to actually ask questions about this so that when they're pursuing the topic, they're trying to answer things that they really want to know.
Encourage them to ask what-if questions, build concepts through experiences, and provide opportunities where together they can brainstorm to generate many ideas. So, how can you implement these strategies right away? Step 1. Think of ways in which your students can engage in the content for your next lesson in diverse ways. Step 2. Ask your students to develop their own questions about the content. Step 3. Give your students opportunities to tie the content to their own experiences. Step 4. Give them the tools to communicate their ideas in new ways.
I think when we stop thinking about teaching a subject, but rather in engaging students in the real work of historians, scientists, and authors, we see that all of these disciplines engage in creative thinking, and the kids get to do that in an authentic way. It's not about adding creativity in, it's really about uncovering the natural creativity of all the disciplines.
Some teachers may think of math, for example, as a subject where creativity might be a little harder to incorporate. We tend to think of math as a subject that has a right answer, and students are supposed to calculate it. We don't want them to be creative, we want them to be accurate. Not necessarily. Truth is, mathematicians solve things in many different ways. And so one thing that you could do is to challenge students to find many different ways to solve the same problem.
For example, my son was learning about shapes and angles, and instead of just looking at it on a worksheet, he created an Adobe Spark video where he went around his house and took pictures, real-world examples, and pulled them together and made meaning by explaining what each angle was. That connection will live in his brain forever.